Water-based finishes are a great alternative to an oil-based finish, but can be a little tricky to apply. Let me show you how I apply them. To prep the surface, I sand it with my random orbit sander with 80 grit, 120 grit, and 180 grit sandpaper. There's no secret to that. Just apply it with your random orbit sander. And when it comes time to applying the finish, I use these paint strainers that I got from Harbor Freight. Pour the amount that you're going to need through the paint strainer. I'm using a foam brush to apply this. If you have a tabletop, get a 4-inch wide foam brush. That way it takes less time to apply it, so it'll start setting up as soon as you start applying it. All right, this is pretty thick here. I apply the finish by starting on one edge of the board and work my way to the other edge, slightly overlapping my previous brush stroke to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Now, you want to get it on thick. All right, so it's on there. You want to leave it alone. You don't want to keep working it into the surface. Move that one out of the way. Now I'm going to show you what the polyacrylic looks like. Typically I've had an easier time applying this polyacrylic. I didn't have to put it on as thick. So I actually put the polyacrylic on thinner than I do the enduro-var. And these are just things that you figure out as you go. Each finish is different. You just gotta test it. And that's what finishing is all about. You gotta test it, learn how it works, and then apply it. And that's all I do for the polyacrylic. All right, the first coat's dried. It's been 24 hours since I applied the first coat, but typically you can apply scuff sand and apply the second coat after 2 to 4 hours, just to make sure that it's dry. So I got some 320 grit sandpaper here, and I'm just gonna sand the surface to get it smooth, because it's really rough right now after raising the grain. You don't want to put too much pressure on this when you're sanding to where you can see scratches underneath the second coat. So just lightly sand it and keep feeling it to make sure that it's smooth after raising the grain. And you'll know that it's ready to be sanded because when you start to sand it, it's chalky. If it were still wet, it would gum up on your sandpaper, and if that's the case, just let it set and continue to dry. So after I sand it, to get the dust off, I just take a paper towel and get it wet and wipe it off. Since this is a water-based finish, you can just use water to get off the excess dust. So now that it's dry, I'm going to apply the second coat. Keep charging your foam brush. And this second coat really just starts to build the finish, whereas the first coat is just sealing the wood. So now with the second coat, you're actually starting to build a nice film finish. And that's it. You're gonna just let it sit. You don't play with the finishes. And now I'm gonna sand the polyacrylic board and apply it the same way. Starting in the middle of the board and working my way out. Never start from the edge and pull in, because that will create some runs on the sides of your board. All right, it's been 24 hours. The second coat's now dry, so I'm gonna do the same thing I did on the last coat. I'm gonna sand it with 320 grit, making sure not to press too hard when I'm sanding, and then I'm gonna go ahead and apply the third coat. And this is the enduro-var. I'm going to apply 3 coats for the purposes of this video, because applying one more is just tedious. You would apply it the same way that I applied the first 3. So I'll let it dry, and then tomorrow I'll show you the results. All right, so here's the final outcome after applying 3 coats on each of the boards. I had a little bit of bubbles in the polyacrylic. So I sanded that last coat down just like I would normally and just applied another coat. So this is a gloss, the polyacrylic is, and the enduro-var is a semi-gloss. So there's a difference in the sheen between the two. So I just wanted to also mention that you can use a synthetic brush to apply the finish. You don't have to use a foam brush. So if you prefer, you can use a synthetic brush. Even after the final coat, the finish will still have some dust nibs in it, so I like to wait 7 to 10 days and then come back and wax the piece with a white 3M Scotch-Brite pad. But be careful not to buff too hard or it will change the sheen of the finish. Alright, so hopefully this has given you a few tips. So go out there and get some water-based finishes and practice on a few test pieces. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up button below, and if you're not already, please subscribe to the channel.